I'm Tabitha Rock.
And I'm Sam Davenport.
Born and bred in Melbourne, we live and breathe property, and we know the Melbourne market like the back of our hand. We've both been buying and selling real estate in Metro Melbourne for over 2 decades combined, and we've learned a few lessons along the way.
Property Culture Podcast. We're here with the gorgeous looking,
Gorgeous
and bloody
girl.
intelligent.
Well, goes without saying.
Goes without saying. Brains and beauty. Claire Cunnington from Velocity Legal.
You two are too kind. So
Family
early in the
lawyer.
morning and too kind.
So early in the morning and with 2 babies at home.
Correct.
You're amazing. What a Wonder Woman. Here just to talk to us all about how
To protect yourself.
she is a family lawyer. So we're talking all things that and real estate, which is important, especially when we deal with so many young professional couples, even singles that own their property. They've bought as a single professional and now they're dating someone.
You think you're in love.
Yeah.
That's what we should call this one. So you think you're in love.
Yeah. And then you lose your house.
Yes. How to protect yourself.
But Velocity Legal, tell us about you. Tell us about Velocity Legal. What's the background?
Sure. So I've been a family lawyer for about a decade now, and I'm what they call an accredited family law specialist, which means I just solely practice in family law, which is dealing with people who have separated, parenting, property disputes, or we do occasionally do some things that are prior to separation, such as prenups, colloquially, but they're called binding financial agreements or child support agreements. And I work for a firm called Velocity Legal, which is in the city, and there's about 40 of us. So
Wow.
And you do everything.
we do everything
firm.
except criminal, but the family law team is probably about 8 of us at the moment. So, I
Okay.
mean, within that team, yeah.
Awesome.
Love it. And do you guys sort of do a lot of work then with the Wills and Estates team? Is that sort of your hand in hand?
Yeah,
The
there
teams?
is a lot of cross-pollination between the teams, some more than others, but, you know, particularly with family law, it is one of those areas where people probably might have estates issues or a will or, you know, there might be a tax issue, and we've got a fantastic tax team that can deal with that. We have a property team, you know. Families, they're always so unique and so they have so many problems or issues that sometimes touch on many areas of law, particularly in a separation. So it's helpful to have people within, you know, the firm who might be able to provide you assistance.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point because I actually always say go, you know, use this solicitor when it comes to property law because she's boutique and but I guess that it is quite isolated contract law. Whereas, you know, family law, you're right, does probably need conversations with a lot of other lawyers that have specialties in other areas.
Absolutely. It can vary from, you know, criminal, child protection. There can be any area of law really. And that's probably one of the things that I'm drawn to is that no 2 families are the same and no 2 scenarios are the same. So that's, you know, it doesn't keep it boring for me.
Yeah. You've really got to like listen to the client, look at sort of how are we coming at this, you know, how are we going to
Correct.
help this as a whole rather than just, dealing with the direct issue, I guess, of like a traffic offence.
Exactly. And the frustrating thing
looking
is
at
that some
anyone.
of these different areas of laws have different tensions. So, you know, there might not be a perfect way to minimize tax and you know, sell something as an investment or, you know, have the family business not have to be taken into consideration in a family law separation. So sometimes it can be really frustrating that things are pulling in different areas when you want to try and keep things as clinical and clean and easy as possible.
I love that terminology, the tensions, different tensions.
Yeah.
I'm going to use that. maybe related to work, maybe not. You know, I'm just going to pull it out. But we've got lots of questions here.
Hit me.
Because as I said right from the start, you know, we see a lot, we do a lot of vendor advocacy.
Yes.
So we see the end product of people selling real estate when they maybe, you know, can't sit in the same room as each other and there's lawyers involved. And then we see the other side of it where we're buying real estate for people and they're in this really beautiful, harmonious state of their relationship. And I guess you would be exactly the same. But what are some of the most common real estate issues you handle as a family lawyer?
I think the most common that come up, probably 2. Number 1 would be, you know, parties have separated, someone wants to keep a property, you know, naturally they're going to say the property's worth nothing.
Peanuts.
Yeah, it's worth peanuts. And then, the former partner is saying, oh, it's worth millions. And so you've got this argument about what's it's worth, which is where, you either get sworn valuers to come in. Some people use real estate agents, but I would say a sworn valuer for family law purposes is sort of the standard, and they use a formula to figure out what they think the property would be worth, and they write a report, and that ends up being, evidence in a court case if needed. That would be number one. Number two would probably be, the realities of whether a party can retain a property.
Yeah.
Melbourne property is not cheap. You're probably going to have to refinance against your mortgage if you have one to pay out your former partner.
Yeah.
And sometimes that reality is it's just not going to happen, And so then what happens if neither party can retain a property is we're going to have to sell. And then naturally there might be one party who doesn't want to do that. They might have children they're trying to obviously keep close to the local school. All of those horrible realities that come with separation. But, unfortunately it happens a lot. So, it's
well,
just
listen,
a sad
aren't we
reality.
up to 50% of
Yeah,
marriages?
apparently.
Hasn't it always been at 50?
I
Has it
don't
always been
know.
at 50?
I
Not
thought
always.
maybe post-COVID
But
we're
in
up
the
to
last-
60. No.
Yeah,
I feel
yeah.
like COVID was particularly brutal on a lot of relationships. The
Brought
court
all
made a
existing
special
issues
COVID
to the
list.
forefront, Claire.
Really
Probably.
bubbled to the surface.
They were in your face.
They
Your
were
issues were in your
my
face.
Yeah.
face.
Well, you were licking
Couldn't
your
hide
lips
from
over that time, weren't you, girl? Jeez Louise.
They would be the two main issues I see time and time again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We've got a couple going through divorce. How is real estate handled in that scenario? I mean, first you look at if one party wants to hold on and then if they can afford it, or what if both parties are like, no, I want it all sold and I never want to see this property again?
So if one party can legitimately afford it and make a settlement payment to their spouse, the court will allow them the opportunity to do that.
First and foremost,
right? But that has to be a reality, and sometimes, unfortunately, that isn't a reality.
Yeah.
But if it is a reality, then they'll stay in the property, they'll pay out their former spouse, and then it'll essentially go through like a conveyance. So you'll have your two people who I presume are registered on your title, and then one party will come off title to get their lump sum of money, right? Now that's sort of the process. Obviously, if you have a scenario where, one party doesn't want to sell and they can't retain the property, then, the party who might be a bit more realistic might have to issue court proceedings to sort of force them to the negotiating table.
Right.
Because, otherwise you'll just be
In a stalemate.
sending them legal letters, which will cost you a small fortune, saying, let's sell the property. But, they're resisting.
What is the circumstances whereby this occurs? So you've got a couple who have decided they're separating. They're going to get divorced. They haven't divorced just yet. So nothing has been agreed upon just yet. They live in the home they own together. Why would the advice ever be to not leave the home? Whilst this, fight is ensuing, we're talking about a tumultuous situation where it's not amicable. And why would the advice ever be don't leave the property, stay in the home until it's all organised?
Some people have this notion that, possession is 9/10 of the law. And so they think if I move out of the matrimonial home, I'm going to lose some sort of position. And then I'm going to lose the opportunity to make that person move a bit quicker.
Right.
And, that's sort of the
payment.
attitude I think that people see. And then also they're going to have to get a bond. They're going to have to get rent. That might not be easy for them.
Yes.
Or they might
If
have
they
to go
move out.
Yeah. So I think they see it as a positional thing. Most of the time it's probably gotten to the stage where it's untenable, or you don't physically have the space, or the bedrooms are occupied by kids, or, and so someone normally elects to leave. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it can drag on for a really long time. So you'd have to want to stay in a pretty potentially volatile or frustrating environment for 6 months, 12 months, however long it takes. And I think some people just can't handle it.
Yeah. Is that the sort of standard time frame, like 6 to 12 months from like decision making the call to you to when it's, that sort of sales occurred, either whether it's both have sold or one party sold to the other? Is that like a standard time frame?
I wouldn't say it's standard. It's hard because some people might take a little bit longer to sort of see the writing on the wall, and so that might drag things on. But, if you agree and it's amicable and you both agree, hey, we've got to sell this house, you could probably get that done from, getting the agent appointed to settlement and having documents drafted with a lawyer within like 3 to 4 months, including your settlement period.
Yeah.
That would probably be your best case scenario.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you hate each other, one party doesn't want to sell the property, it's probably going to take a bit longer.
Yeah.
So I would say 6 months would probably be a good, fast outcome if one party is being really difficult, but it wouldn't be uncommon to see something from 6 to 12 months.
Yeah.
And you've also got to realize, people don't want to sell their properties on Christmas. Like they want to sell their properties at times when they're going to try and make money. And so that might also be something that delays when you list it. Or they might say, I want to keep the kids in this school until the end of term 4.
Yeah.
So can we list it after that time? So there's other factors that come into play that might just make it longer or shorter.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And when people are going through that process of selling a jointly owned home as part of a divorce, whether that be an investment property or anything, are there any legalities around how they select agents, how that whole process, because I've heard so many scenarios where one partner loves the agent because they get their local coffee, and then the other partner hates that agent and wants to go with this one. How's that sort of dispute handled? Is there any formalities?
Yeah, so if you're in the court system, back in the day, everyone used to sort of turn up with what they call panel of agents or panels of conveyancers, and you'd have, agent 1, agent 2, agent 3, and you try and negotiate on the day.
Right.
And some people can have some really weird bees in their bonnets about certain agents for a myriad of reasons. But now they sort of make you go to court with your one agent that you're going to appoint and your one conveyancer. So, if you don't like the agent number 1 and I don't like the agent number 2, then you're probably going to get another agent completely.
Oh, right. Neither one wins.
No, neither one wins. What I always say to clients is most of the time agents are there to try and get you the best price. They're not going to get some sort of kickback. That's their job. Even if they were getting coffees, if you've got an agent who's a friend, they might give you a slightly better commission rate. Isn't that a good thing?
Yes.
Like
totally. Well, we had because we do the vendor advocacy, obviously, and in a divorce recently, one of the parties had an agent they wanted to use, and the other party was saying no, they didn't want to use them because they felt that there was some sort of
insider dealing.
Or just I've gone blank on the
collusion
word that she used. Yeah, it was something along those lines between the other two, and that it was because maybe there was other property to sell down the track that was nothing to do with them, and it just was. I just thought we're putting the property to public market.
Yes.
Number 1. It's going to market publicly.
Yes.
If it was an off-market sale on the side, okay, perhaps there can be something happening there that we can't control as much. But public auction is public auction. Like that is as straightforward as you can get for a sale.
Yeah.
I would think so. I have had clients before where the agent wasn't potentially local to the area, and I thought that smelled a little bit fishy. Or they were for one of these agencies that, might be online only, and I'm not making a comment about the quality of that because I don't know, but, most people want sort of the bigger name brands when it comes to real estate agents that are local to the area.
Yeah.
Often it might be the person that sold them the house, that sort of stuff. Agents cop a lot of hate, whereas I'm yet to really experience one who's done a dodgy deal.
Yeah.
Well, when it comes to
well, in my experience.
Yeah. They're keeping it above board for you because there's lawyers involved.
Yes.
Absolutely. And they actually want the best outcome, which is the best, highest commission they can get for the best price for the property.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think, though, you would speak to this better than I, but when people are in these moments of their life, they're in the trenches, they're in their own head, they're thinking that everything's dodgy.
Out to get them.
And so, I mean, this is related to property. So a couple's wanting to go through a divorce, they contact you, and then does everything just freeze? Because I've heard people, they're going through a divorce, they're in their matrimonial home, they're on the title together, but they've got an investment property that's only in the husband's name.
Yeah.
When they're going, and maybe the wife's now concerned that will be sold underneath her and the money disappears. what is like, can the lawyer in that case put caveats on properties like to calm people in that scenario?
Yeah, so if someone's got a caveatable interest, sure. In that scenario, it sounds like the wife would have what we call a caveatable interest. She'd instruct her lawyer to lodge a caveat, and there's certain, check boxes they've got to make sure that they're not just lodging caveats willy-nilly. I think back sort of, a decade ago when I was starting out, the lodging of caveats was a bit more cowboy. And now there's a process to kick those sorts of not necessarily appropriate caveats off. But in that scenario, the parties would both go get lawyers. They'd probably do some level of financial disclosure if they didn't know each other's financial positions. And then they'd go off either to a mediation by agreement or court order, and they'd start to get the wheels in motion to sort of divide everything up.
Right.
What we call just and equitable. So, fair in the eyes of the court, so to speak.
Yeah. So then that leads us into my favorite question of today, which is because this is the position so many of our clients are in. If they are a couple, very happily in love, everything's going great, they're planning to spend the rest of their lives together, they're choosing to buy property together, what should they be thinking about? What should they be doing prior to marriage in order to protect themselves if they choose to, want to, have any interest in doing so? What are the sort of circumstances, scenarios whereby protection should be put in place? Tell us.
So it's going back to those binding financial agreements, which, when
AKA
people are truly,
prenup.
yeah, exactly. When people are in love, they're not exactly thinking about that sort of level of protection because they're going to be together forever.
Of course they are.
Like they said, true love.
Yeah.
I will say that, BFAs are kind of on the rise, particularly when there's the bank of mum and dad involved.
Yes.
And
Yes.
also if they're
Which
on their
is so
second
often.
relationship or marriage and they've been burned, or they've got a settlement payment that they're putting more into the next house that they're going to buy with the new love. So they are sort of on the rise, but, I would say for the young couple that are starting out, unless there is one party with a significant amount of assets behind them or the bank of mum and dad, you don't see it as much.
Because they're genuinely starting at the same level. So the idea is that while they're together, what is built is equal.
Yeah, and what's mine is yours, what's yours is mine. It's an awkward conversation to have.
Yeah.
People think, well, if we're going to be together, why are we getting this like insurance document in place?
Yeah.
What happens if they're potentially coming in with the same deposit maybe for the property, but then once that mortgage kicks in, one person's paying a higher portion?
Well, look, the court will just look at it as like you were a team, you were in a marriage or a relationship, and that was how you structured your finances, presumably because maybe your incomes reflected higher income, paid more.
And so they would separate that 50-50.
Not necessarily 50-50, but the person who puts in more to the mortgage is not going to get necessarily a dollar for dollar reconciliation return.
Yeah.
Because isn't that because it's obviously in relation to their income normally anyway?
That's right. And they just say you were a team. This is how you decided to do it. If you really wanted to make everything 50-50, you probably might have had a conversation to say we're paying everything Dutch. That's just how we're doing it. And maybe we've got a prenup that says if we break up, it's 50-50.
Yeah.
Those sorts of things.
But if Bank of Mum and Dad have given or provided like a lump sum to obviously one party, to both though, in helping them buy their home, but it's really from one party. And the idea was that they get paid back. All of that should be documented.
But that doesn't necessarily need to be a prenup document. That's more of a loan document for the parents.
Yeah, there's a loan doc. You might want to do a loan document between bank of mum and dad and the children or the child and their spouse.
Yeah.
And they might also want a prenup that sort of acknowledges that this money that came from my mum and dad gets paid back or, gets factored into their side of the ledger, so to speak. But the bank of mum and dad is, a blessing and a curse in a family law matter because with, Victoria having really high house prices, probably like New South Wales and many other places, bank of mum and dad's really common.
Yep.
And then we have arguments of like, is it a gift? Did the mum and dad actually expect to ever be repaid or is it a loan? And, most of the time banks and mum and dads probably aren't going to solicitors and getting loan agreements drawn up, even when they're really savvy, wealthy parents. It's just not something that a lot of parents do. And so what can happen is parties separate many, many years later.
Yeah.
No loan agreement.
So would you recommend people do? Go to solicitors and
I would, but you need to also know some of the pitfalls that come with it. So, you can get a loan agreement drafted up by lawyers. You'd probably need to have some sort of repayment schedule. You'd probably need to have some sort of interest component, not as high as bank interest, but no interest means it's an uncommercial loan that leans more towards a gift. If you have terms that say, well, if you break up, I want my money back, and that's what we call an at-call loan, they have a statute of limitation of 6 years. So if that relationship lasts 10 years, 20 years, and bank and mum and dad didn't call in the loan, didn't institute court proceedings against their child, which how often is that going to happen? Yeah. Then it's leaning more towards a gift rather than a loan. So, and that means it goes into the asset pool to be divided up between the parties rather than a liability taken off the top. Yeah. And that takes up a big chunk of financial matters.
Right.
And you can have really harsh conversations with bank and mum and dad to say, you're not going to get it back.
Oh my gosh.
Or if you get it back, it's coming out of what he or she or they get.
Your child's.
And your child's then going to have to pay you back. And sometimes they genuinely want to be paid back. And sometimes, they might do it for positional purposes so that the ex-spouse that they, now suddenly aren't so favourable with
has to pay them a portion, but
it
they
reduces
don't get
everything. Yeah, correct.
So talk us through these prenups. Like, okay, Sam and I are about to get married. Do we rock up to Claire's office and just sit down there and
definitely
we talk
not
about
together?
No, right? Okay,
not together.
Not together. We don't call you up and we don't go together.
Oh.
And like, what sort of cash are we talking that prenups can set us back? Is it sort of paid on engagement, then when the documents put together? Give us
sure. So first of all, you wouldn't see a lawyer together. That would be a conflict of interest. You'd have to go get your own lawyers. These are the type of agreements that are very technical, and you need to get a lawyer each to sign what we call an independent certificate of legal advice. And that advice has to come from the lawyer to each party to say, this is what you're contracting out of, or this is what you're agreeing to, and this is the advantages and disadvantages of entering into this type of agreement. Now, because these documents are quite technical, some lawyers don't love doing them. Some do, like Velocity, we do quite a few. And so what you would then have is probably one party, and I'm going to make an assumption here, like the financially stronger party might say, well, I'll get my lawyer to draft it.
Yeah.
So they'll draft the document and then they'll send it off to, Sam's lawyer, let's just say, for example.
Yeah.
And then you'll go back and forth.
Yeah. God, I instantly feel like,
I know. You will just look at my document.
Yeah. You will approve my suggestions.
You will get input and you would say, I don't agree to those terms.
Yeah.
And you go back and forth and you might want some level of disclosure and things like that. And once you're both satisfied with the agreement and the deal, then you sign it off.
Yeah.
And then, if you separate, that's when it comes into play.
And as a part of this prenup, we sort of have to sit down and disclose our financial position? Yes.
Well, yes. If you don't, then that's one of the grounds that these things can be set aside. So, if Tabitha says, I'm worth $10 million and I've disclosed my $10 million,
but she forgot to mention Cayman Islands.
Yeah. Then you would be running to court saying, let's set this thing aside.
This has to be set aside because it's a false document.
Correct.
Wow.
Correct.
Interesting.
This is how the insurance companies get you. They're like, you didn't tell us that you had an eye infection for 5 seconds.
Yeah,
so now
exactly.
we're not giving you glasses or something.
Yeah.
Right. Interesting. And then, so I would imagine that process can take a short amount of time or a long.
Yeah, I mean, maybe a couple of months, it depends how fast. One thing about these documents is, they can't be signed like the day of a wedding or a week before a wedding or,
because that's it's called under duress or?
Duress or undue influence, unconscionable conduct, all of these sort of like nasty terms when there's a power imbalance at play.
Yes.
And it's pretty much like, if you don't sign this, we're not getting married or we're not something.
Yeah. And for just a normal couple, are we talking this is costing us $1,000 each or we're talking $10,000 each?
I would say probably on your best day you might be looking in sort of the mid 3s to 4, and on one that takes a lot of negotiation and it's really complex, it might be somewhere in the 10s.
And that's each?
No, I would say that's the drafting party, and then the person who might just have to get a bit of negotiation and their letter of advice or advice from their lawyer might be sort of towards that lower end or even less.
Yeah.
Just depends.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm giving you the lawyer answer. It just depends.
Yeah. It just depends. Of course. Of course.
T's and C's apply. Okay. Well,
I love that even though you do this full time and you see this all day, every day, you still chose to get married.
well,
It's like, no, it just goes to show the power of love.
No, she
I'm
got
in a de
into
facto.
Yeah.
What's
I
this?
know. I'm
No,
engaged.
they were together before she knew better.
I know people always say to me, when are you getting married? I'm like, I help people get out of marriages.
people get
but I'm in a de facto
divorced.
relationship of 15 years. So it's essentially the same.
But there is a lot less paperwork to deal with when you split.
Oh, there probably is. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, no marriage certificate.
Yeah.
You know, probably don't need to change your name if you've done that.
Yeah.
All that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Well, we love less paperwork.
Absolutely.
Less paperwork.
Okay, so we've
though.
spoken about the divorce people, all sad and miserable. We've spoken about the lovebirds. Now let's speak about the rosy-eyed single people that have bought their little apartment or big house, whatever, you know, whatever money they have. Partner's moved in.
Yes.
Talk to us about that scenario. When does it become a bit grey? What should people look out for in that scenario?
Yeah, and there's a bit of misinformation about this. So people always say to me, oh, I've been with my partner for 6 months. Does that mean they can take, you know, half of mine?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know where the 6 months came. I feel like it might have been a Centrelink sort of. If you're with someone for 6 months, you probably should have declared that relationship to Centrelink. I don't know how many people did. But if you want the jurisdiction of the Federal Circuit and Family Court of Australia, it's got to be 2 years.
Okay.
Or, as always, there are some exceptions. If you have a baby, if it's 9 months, 10 months, you've had the baby straight away, you're in.
Yeah.
And if you've both made a significant investment into something, like less than 2 years, and one party would be significantly, you know, financially screwed over, so to speak, if you didn't have the jurisdiction of the court, then you would be given.
So I've bought my apartment. I'm living in it. My boyfriend moves in after 6 months. He starts paying me rent, market rent, like 50% of market rent.
Yep.
So it's got to 18 months and he's saying now like the relationship's dissolved and he wants his money back.
Yeah, well, I mean, you
might, like, I don't know, he wants some compensation.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you could have two real approaches to this. You could, you know, you might want to just pay him back and just get rid of him. You don't have to.
He paid for his housing.
I know. I'm just saying, if you were being generous. Or alternatively.
We're not.
Yeah.
I didn't think so, and I'm putting all the options to you.
Yeah.
Or alternatively, you can say, well, we haven't hit the 2-year threshold to go to court.
Technically.
So we can have an argument about that in court, about you not having the jurisdiction to get a financial settlement out of me. What I anticipate he might say is, I've lost all this money, and I don't know how much that would be.
Not so
I anticipate what they would say. It's not losing money because they're paying for housing, whether they're living with you or somewhere else. But I anticipate them to say, I've paid off your mortgage.
Yes.
Yeah, probably.
And it's like, anyway.
Yes.
We don't know this person. This person doesn't exist and I'm getting frustrated.
But also that person needs to consider, all right, to get to one of these threshold hearings, to have an argument about whether you meet whether you're allowed to proceed, they might spend 20 to 40 grand.
Wow.
So they've really got to think long and hard
about whether they want their 10 grand back.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Is there anything called like legal aid when it comes to family matters? Is that a thing?
There is legal aid, yeah. I mean, look, I haven't done legal aid for a really, really long time, but back then, if it was just a financial matter, you weren't eligible. And if it was a financial matter with a parenting matter, it had to be under a certain amount of money. And I think it was like 300-400 grand. And at the end of that, legal aid might have taken, you know, a very small amount of any settlement. So it's not truly free sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is legal aid.
Right.
But and it often can get paid by the other party. Like your costs, legal costs can get paid by the other party. Or that can be part of the settlement.
When you're using a normal lawyer?
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that, no. Family law acts says parties bear their own costs, which is what people need to keep in mind when you're both arguing over the same pot of money, right? So don't let your legal fees eclipse what you're arguing over.
If we're arguing over that painting,
Yes.
Yeah.
You know,
The
but
electric
it costs
toothbrush.
lawyers.
I've had people.
Really?
Oh, come
Yes.
on.
Oh, we need a whole part 2 just for your stories, Claire,
Yeah.
because that will be fascinating.
But just to take that question of I own my own place. My new partner moves in. Now we've gone past the 2-year threshold. We're now into 3 and 4 years.
Yeah.
And they are helping me do updates. Maybe they're painting the place for me. Or maybe they are doing minor building works to the property because they can. That's they're a trade or something. Is that now, again, we're just in that situation of they can try to get, if they go through that $20,000, $40,000 legal system, they can try and get something.
Yeah.
Or they can just walk away.
No, they can try and get something, and I anticipate they would probably say something along the lines of, without me being a tradie, you wouldn't be able to do this renovation and your property wouldn't have increased in value. This is my tradie voice.
Yeah, I know.
Increased in value.
That's pretty good.
So, I deserve 20, 30%, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
That's a non-financial contribution. So it gets factored in. It's not an automatic 50%. If that's what you're worried about.
They don't
too hard to say. Yeah.
But baby, different story.
Well, babies do, often give the parent who's looking after the child an adjustment, but that's really because they're staying at home looking after a child and their income might have dropped. Probably not contributing to their super. They probably might not return to full-time work. That's the sort of factors. It's not just she popped out a baby and she got 60%. You know, it's not as arbitrary as that. It's a total assessment of who brought what in, how you got to the financial position you're in today, who needs what for the future. And then the court kind of makes a bit of an assessment to say, this is, just and equitable. One party's not just keeping super that they can't access till their retirement age and the other person gets everything or a really, really unfair deal, so to speak.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. We have got to the end of our time.
Covered
with
it
you,
all.
Claire.
It's gone so quick.
I
I know it's quick, isn't it?
But we do obviously have our favourite segment.
Our favourite segment, and you're an inner city lady. You're a Melbourne girlie.
Yes.
You've lived in 3 of our favourite suburbs in Melbourne.
Yeah.
They're very closely connected. Some might say they're very similar. You would know better than most that they are very different areas. F, marry, kill. Collingwood,
Ooh.
Fairfield,
Ooh.
Clifton Hill.
Oh.
Drum roll.
That's just me thinking.
Yeah. I need more time. No, you've got to repeat the question back to me to get more time.
So true.
All right. I'm going to say marry Fairfield. So, I'm in my family era. I've got small children and I need the space.
Space and safety.
Yeah. I'm going to always say Collingwood because it's got the best.
It's got the best what?
It's got the best vibe, the best drinks, the best food, the best energy. I do miss it a lot.
Yeah.
And then I'm gonna have to sadly just say kill Clifton Hill because
It's the last man
the last
standing.
man standing. But I do love Clifton
We
Hill.
love Clifton Hill.
Yeah.
There's not a lot there.
They've got a Metro supermarket, which is really given something.
When that was being built, that was like the biggest news about Clifton Hill. It's getting a Metro supermarket.
It's got a
great.
McDonald's.
It's got the most
does
Art Deco McDonald's you've ever
it's
seen.
pretty.
It's I forget about that strip up the top. I always think that's
is that
Northcote.
brothel still there? That's
I
next
think
to the
it is.
Macca's.
I think it
so
is.
you can get your burger and get some
your
rock
quarter
salt.
pounder and then
Oh my God.
I didn't mean it like
She's a lawyer and she's got the jokes. Sam, did you get the pounder joke?
I didn't
Quarter
hear it.
pounder.
You can get your double quarter pounder and then you can.
Ah.
Oh, Jesus.
I was thinking of my own joke, which was burger and a show.
Oh.
But brothel is not strippers. I'm getting confused.
Yeah, that's right.
I think it's a brothel.
easily
I mean,
done.
look, I'm not the clientele, but I
No.
think it's a brothel.
No, not
Anyway,
currently.
well, thanks so much for joining us, Claire
Thank
from
you.
Velocity Legal. You have really just busted some myths. And, lawyer talk is usually dry talk, but this was not dry. And I think it's very worthwhile, whether you're single, in a relationship, nearing
Looking
the end
to
of
leave
one.
yeah.
It's all relevant. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Claire.
Thanks so much for having me.